Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where every day I share a story from somewhere in the world about how technology is transforming the guest's life, business, industry, or even our entire world. And my mantra for this podcast has always been, technology works best when it brings people together. And after 2,000 interviews from over 80 different countries, I think we're kind of proven that it really does. And today I want to talk to a successful Ukrainian tech startup founder who, although is now living in the US, recently had to put everything on hold after his homeland was plunged into war. But he and a team of Ukrainian immigrants got together and are working to fund 6 teams that are on the ground in Ukraine and helping the citizens' most critical daily needs, from food for bomb shelters, sleeping pads, evacuations of seniors' homes, baby formula, etc. And it is such a powerful story, and I want to invite you all to join me and Daniil from Ukraine TrustChain to hear his very personal story and about ordinary people doing extraordinary things to help each other and doing all that by leveraging technology. But enough from me. Let's get Daniil onto the podcast now. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Daniil. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
I'm Daniil. I live in Chicago area. Have had my career in tech. I'm a tech executive for real estate tech firm. Zillow was it a smaller firm, and then Zillow is a large website that acquired us. Doing all kinds of technology work in the data science space for them. But all of those projects are on hold now. I'm from Kyiv. As soon as the war started, we had to put everything on pause and switch to doing nonprofit humanitarian aid work, and that's kind of what I'm trying to talk to people to promote and to explain what we do there and how tech community is involved in that effort.
And it's something that I'm really looking forward to talking with you and helping spread the word about what you're seeing and hearing here. But on your origin story, can you just tell me a little bit about your history from Kyiv and how you got here and your passion for technology? Because obviously you've been on quite a journey, haven't you?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I was born in Kyiv. And then in the 90s, like many others, I immigrated to Chicago. Mm-hmm. Had a good, math background coming out of high school. Started working here in the financial sector a little bit, and then just joined a startup in the real estate technology space. And I was fortunate enough that startup grew exponentially over the 10-year periods that I was with it. I was running operations for this, then was a chief analytics officer for them. And I just had a very successful professional life building this up. Last year, it was sold for a lot of money. You can see it in the news. The company was called Showtime, and it was one of the key companies in the real estate data space and in the space of setting appointments and coordinating home viewings for homes on sale in the US, doing, tens of millions of appointments a month. That's where I got my experience in working with distributed teams, complex data flows. But I've had other interests, and I've been connected to Ukrainian communities throughout this time. And all of these things, all of my skills, they got activated a month ago when this whole thing broke out. There is always a very personal side to the story too. So my friend had twins that were born under shelling in Kyiv to a surrogate mother right on the second day of the war. That's when I realized that the war kind of entered my everyday life, even though I was in Chicago, but he's calling me and we were trying to figure out how to get baby food to that facility because that small hospital was running out of preemie food. And then I posted on social media. A random person at that time contacted me in comments saying, I will go. And it's a realtor, a young mother. She just drove to the nearest pharmacy. That pharmacy was shelled, so it was closed. She started driving to another pharmacy, and just kept driving to get baby food for us. And I felt at that point, wow, this is like a short story, but you can immediately trust this person. And then I kept looking for ways to help, and I'm like, okay, this is a volunteer doing all this work in Ukraine. I will give money to her. She will probably do something good with it. And there is such an enormous goodwill in Ukraine around this resistance effort. That these organizations work like this speed of growth is way beyond anything I've seen, even in the startup scene in the US. On Monday, she was alone. On Wednesday, there were 6 people working for her. By Sunday, she had 70 people running parallel tasks, running Telegram bot services, looking for elderly after stroke, trapped in their apartments, and coordinating where to get fuel, where to get cash, where to get, where to buy supplies, medication. And as you can see, I start from my normal career, and then as soon as I start talking about this, it kind of tumbles into this world of war that just kind of entered my life now. And while I'm still in my bedroom in Chicago,
Yeah, and it's such a powerful story. And, but right now we're using technology to spread these stories around the world. I think we've got people listening in 165 different countries. So every word that you're saying here is going to resonate with people scattered all over the world. But how did it go from there to becoming involved in this Chicago non-profit called Ukraine TrustChain? And can you offer a bit of an overview of how it's primarily run by Ukrainian immigrants who are working to fund 6 teams on the ground, but using technology? Can you tell me more about that?
Yes, it came very naturally when, as I mentioned, my friends are all in, high-powered professional in Chicago tech scene. And Chicago tech companies often work on infrastructure projects and, with their high-end developers and marketing agency managers and so forth. So when I started giving money to one team, and then quickly I realized that, okay, I still have more money of my own that I want to give to the cause. So through my connections, through the person I was helping, and through my close friends in Ukraine, I found other trustworthy connections that I started giving money to. And then in 2 to 3 days, I kind of started burning through everything I had allocated for this. And I started talking to my friends to get their funds. In 2 to 3 days, though, I started drowning in the activity. And then 20 of my closest friends did almost an intervention style call, just like forced me to get on Zoom call, and we discussed structure. Then I was thinking about this. I just didn't yet have the time because I was round the clock on the phone with volunteers, just trying to figure out how to wire them money, where can they get that, but it was great that my friends came together and started running this as an org. We distributed functions among them. And then within 2 days, it was clear that it made more sense to have an organization so that people feel more comfortable giving money to a registered nonprofit with, standard oversight. A major law firm stepped in with pro bono help, thanks to Neil Gerber Eisenberg. And they've helped set up a nonprofit for this effort. But at the core of it, it's still me and my friends and our direct trusted connections that we funnel the money to. But in the environment of war, these seemingly random connections grow into an institution within Ukraine that you can actually track on social networks and through hundreds of social media connections of all the work they're doing in Kyiv, in Bucha, in Gostomel, all this Kharkiv, all these places, Mariupol, all the frontline zones that suffer from this humanitarian catastrophe that was unleashed on Ukraine by the invaders.
And what was it made you leverage crypto and blockchain straight away as part of that donation strategy? Was that quite an easy decision to make early on?
Yes, it's one thing that I noticed was that these decisions, they happen instantaneously when the need is urgent, and when you have something as motivating as situation in Ukraine. Yep, on Friday, we realized that we collected more funds for the volunteers, that they've spent everything they had, and the banks are closed. So we sat together with my friend Jan Pritzker, who runs crypto Bitcoin startup in the Chicago area. And we figured out that the most efficient way to transfer money off banking hours would be through crypto. We push money to the wallet on a Ukrainian crypto exchange. It gets converted to hryvnias, and then we can funnel it directly to debit cards. So we don't have to wait for the banks to be opened. And that became a primary way for us to transfer money in off banking hours when there is an emergency cash infusion that's needed in the middle of the night. Chicago is 8 hour, it's 8 hours difference with Kyiv. So we needed to figure out a way to do it when the American banks are closed. It seems very simple, but a real problem when someone needs money on Saturday and you need to wait till Monday to transfer.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. It highlights a very real problem with the existing and traditional banking system as well. And am I also right in saying, in the same vein, that the name TrustChain is actually based off the principle for blockchain, which was human trust enabling a flow of trust and supplies? Because there's something quite beautiful in that, isn't there, as well?
Yes, I think the idea was, it is the aesthetics, I think, of crypto is driving this a little bit. The idea is that, especially in the early days when we're collecting money directly to our accounts, right, and didn't have an org that would have a reputation, where nobody has seen our organization, we just had a week of history, I would collect money directly or ask people to collect money directly, and the thought was, give the money to someone you trust, and then if they trust me, they will pass the money on to me. And so I think the trust served as hashes in crypto transactions, where you don't need to see the full chain. You just need to make sure that the next person you trust the person that you give the money to, and you would trust them to pass it to a person they trust. And so that was a very effective way to explain that this money will go into the right hands in the early days of the war. That principle is what made it into the name TrustChain, right? It's a blockchain where we use human trust instead of hashes.
And just to bring to life some of what we're talking about here, can you walk me through how this Ukraine TrustChain tech has actually facilitated in the evacuation of more than 13,000 Ukrainian refugees? Because again, it's incredible, isn't it, what you've achieved in such a short amount of time with this technology? Yeah,
the number is actually is over 23,000 now as we speak. So we evacuate. The teams we fund, that's important. I'm not driving under shelling, but the teams we fund evacuate 23,000. We have a trusted connection with people that we know do not spend this money on anything except the very urgent tasks at hand. The money we provide someone goes straight into the gas tanks of the buses that drive people out of the danger zone first. Occasionally, the drivers would need to buy something to eat for them and the people they evacuate. That's a second order priority for that evacuation team, right? And so because of this zero overhead principle that we have, right? And because we established this trusted connection in the very early days where people working and doing all this work, but doing this in such lethal conditions, right? That you knew these were special people, selfless heroes that did it in the face of, just complete calamity and lethal threats, right? And so we are able to sustain this relationship with them, right? And as we provide money, the people that started this very early are the best in the country at doing what they do. They know the sizes of the caravans that are safer to drive, through Russian checkpoints at times, and the roads that they could take. They've done it longer than anyone else by now. And in the war environment, every week is sometimes years of experience gets condensed into a single week, right? And so by sticking to our mission of supporting the volunteer teams, building a relationship with them, and just making sure that they're well-funded and their financial needs are met, that enables them to unleash their resourcefulness, their skills, and their goodwill to do as much good as they can. And just this situation just unlocks this amazing human potential when you have these heroes doing this humanitarian relief effort, right? It's very different from collecting money and then looking for places to do this or getting inbound requests where everybody is positioning themselves, right? And it's very hard to know which cause will be more effective. In this case, because we always go outbound, we find people that do this. We establish connection with people that do this amazing work, and then they tell us where to redirect the funds if needed. The other teams that they see doing the work that is just as effective as what they do. Like this principle allows us to keep evacuation costs, for example, at under $6 a person, right? This is $6 evacuates a person. $6,000 will evacuate 1,000 people in Ukraine. Still, that was the KPI from last week for our evacuation teams.
It's just phenomenal what you've achieved here. And I think also, traditionally, people have been put off with donating to charities because there are, especially here in the UK and the US, there's a lot of big corporations and charities where money gets siphoned off to various third parties, and you don't know that money, that $5, $10, whatever it may be, actually gets to that person that you want it to. And I think with blockchain, it kind of removes all that because you know exactly where it's going and there's one single version of the truth. It's not going anywhere else. And just to bring to life, for anybody that's listening, watching the news, feels helpless, wants to do something, do you have any stats that you can share around how many meals you've provided, evacuations and things, just so people can understand the kind of difference that you're making here and the difference that any of us can make as well?
So the numbers that are easiest to connect to are evacuations. The teams we fund evacuated more than 23,000 people. And as we speak, hundreds more are being evacuated. This is a growing number that grows by 3,000 to 5,000 each week. In terms of the meals provided, the teams that we funded basically helped solve food insecurity situation in Kyiv and are now solving food insecurity in the rural areas and the liberated villages of the Kyiv region after Soviet army was pushed out of that region. We the number of meals is harder to estimate because we bring in roughly 15 to 20 trucks of food into different areas, and those trucks are put together by the volunteers that know what's needed and the foods that would last longer. So in terms of meals, our estimate is about 50 to 70,000 people are being fed weekly with the food that is funded by our organization. Some of it is going into restaurants that feed people for free. That's a very efficient, scalable operation in Kyiv, where a $10,000 truck of food is able to feed roughly 3,000 to 4,000 people daily for about 2 weeks with some basic delicious dishes. We're also looking for the teams always continuously adjust what they do to the realities on the ground. Food security is by now less of an issue in Kyiv. Setting up refugee centers in Dnipro, for example, is a big topic as the evacuation streams increase due to imminent battle for the east kind of unfolding in eastern Ukraine. So there are continuously new objectives that the teams have, but evacuations continue to run. People that need food continue to be fed, right? And then, and then just that's why these answers are so difficult. Is that I start answering and like this avalanche of projects is just comes at me, and I start ranting as a result. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's changing so quickly over there at the moment. And we're recording this on Thursday, the 14th of April. So what's the situation on the ground right now? What are you hearing from Ukraine?
So our teams are located in working in multiple regions. We have about 7 teams that work in different regions, and each region has its own situation. So right now, the main strategic topics are, just last week, Russian forces were pushed out of Kyiv region. And so right now there's a successful humanitarian relief efforts to all the villages around Kyiv. Everybody has heard the name of Bucha and Hostomel, the sites of terrible atrocities perpetrated by the Russian army. But there are dozens of other smaller places that are not on the news and don't get as much direct. And that's what volunteers are focusing on. They're going further and feeding the villages in Chernihiv and the Kyiv region. That's a task that they're successfully solving right now. Our teams now shifting to another region. There is a concern that a large battle is going to unfold in eastern Ukraine. In Kramatorsk, Severodonetsk, Lysychansk, those areas that you have seen possibly a bombed train station a couple of days ago in Kramatorsk. Our volunteers are there encouraging people, especially mothers with children that feel like they have nowhere to go, encourage them to actually leave those areas that could become the zone of fighting over the next few days. And they're setting up refugee centers in cities that are, a couple 100 kilometers away from the zone, such as Dnipro, Vinnytsia, and others. Beyond that, they continue to pursue opportunities to help the humanitarian catastrophe in the south, around Kherson, around Berdyansk, and Mariupol. Even though the official larger orgs are not able to get in there, it's too dangerous. The volunteer networks continue to find ways to get in and bring some food and get some people out of there. So it's amazing that this effort is still ongoing, even though people literally cross enemy lines and lines of artillery fire, basically.
It really is absolutely phenomenal what you're doing here. And is there anything that makes you hopeful about the future, and also how technology is going to continue to be used as a lifeline as well?
Yes, I'm certain that Ukraine will win. And the reason is that it's literally the struggle between the new way to organize humanity and the old way. Ukraine is a distributed network-based system of independent citizens, right, that are doing the thing that they think would be the most effective right now, given the information they have. And they're opposing this rigid vertical structure that controls every movement of everybody in their control. And those are the two systems that are fundamentally clashing here, from a just purely technological way of organizing work of people. And in my experience, decentralized way where people are empowered to make decisions, are mobile, and are able to define their own priorities is a lot more efficient and powerful than a rigid structure where everything is decided by one person and everybody blindly obeys. That's what gives me hope, and that's kind of the beauty that I see in Ukrainian society, in the way the volunteer networks work, in the way the Ukrainian army works. It's the same principle.
And for anyone listening anywhere in the world that's been affected by anything we're talking about today, who feel that they want to help, how can they get involved? What can they do? Do you have a website or anything you can point everyone in the direction of?
Yep. Our website is Ukraine TrustChain.org. The donate button is right at the top. That money goes directly to our organization, which we pass on to volunteer teams in the frontline cities of Ukraine with zero overhead. So again, Ukraine TrustChain.org. There you can find the QR code for our crypto wallet as well. It's all there. So just go to UkraineTrustChain.org and donate. However, one more thing that I should mention, at this point, sharing information about our organization, spreading the word about this direct way of helping Ukrainian volunteers in the most effective way is in many ways even more important than making a personal donation. If you have access to networks of people who might be further away from the epicenter of suffering that we're seeing in Ukraine, we would greatly appreciate if you can understand what we do, look through our media, and share it with your networks. That, I would say, is still the first priority, because I believe that once people see the reality of what's happening and how effective the help is, people that learn about this will donate. And it's in many ways more important than a personal donation from each person. It's just, that's kind of my main message here. Spread the word and tell people where to donate, which is at UkraineTrustChain.org.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today. I appreciate how busy you must be at the moment. I've got far more important matters on your hands than a podcast. But I cannot thank you enough for sharing that story. And for everyone listening, as you said, it's not just about a donation. Anybody can hit the share button and help spread the word. But more than anything, just thank you for sharing that and the work you're doing, and how I always say technology works best when it brings people together. And the fact that you've used technology and your work has helped evacuate 23,000 Ukrainian refugees is inspirational. So keep up that amazing work. I'll add the links to the show notes so people can find you nice and easily. And again, just thank you for taking the time to share it with me today.
Thank you for having me, Neil. I appreciate that.
Such a powerful story. And as Daniil said there, it's not just about donating cash or crypto. It's so much more than that. You can help by simply sharing his story, the work that they're doing. And that can provide so much help to Ukrainian people on its own. So a big thank you to Daniil for taking the time to come on the podcast today and share his story. And an even bigger thank you to each and every one of you for taking the time to listen to this podcast. As always, let me know your thoughts and share your stories by emailing me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, and I'll return again tomorrow with another story from somewhere else in the world. But a big thank you for listening, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.